Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, uncovering stories that shock, intrigue, and leave us questioning the world around us. In today's case, we bring you a chilling and twisted tale, one of betrayal, deception, and a deadly obsession. This is the story of the Thanksgiving tragedy. A tale of family secrets, hidden resentments, and cold-blooded murder. This case will leave you wondering, what lies beneath the perfect family holiday? And how far can someone go when their darkest desires take over? Stay with us as we unravel the dark and tragic story of the Thanksgiving tragedy. Thanksgiving, a time of gratitude and togetherness, where families gather around the table, carving turkey and sharing memories. But for the Parker family, the festivities ended in horror. By the end of the evening, one of them would never see the sun rise again. The Parker family was a picture of suburban perfection, living in a luxurious estate in the wealthy neighborhood of Maplewood. Evelyn and Richard Parker, successful business owners, had built their lives on hard work and meticulous attention to appearances. Their 3 children, Megan, Dylan, and their adopted youngest, 16-year-old Emma, were the pride of their wealthy community in Maplewood. Their Thanksgiving celebrations were an annual tradition in the community, known for their grandeur and warmth. On this particular Thanksgiving, the Parkers spared no expense and fetched in friends, extended family, and neighbors to their meticulously decorated home for a feast that promised laughter, memories, and togetherness. Evelyn spent the week preparing the house, arranging elegant table settings, and supervising the elaborate menu. She prided herself on being the perfect hostess, ensuring every detail was flawless. The dining room glowed with soft candlelight, and the smell of roasted turkey, cranberry sauce, and freshly baked pies filled the air. Guests arrived in droves, exchanging cheerful greetings and compliments on the evening's atmosphere. On the surface, everything seemed ideal. However, beneath the polished exterior, the Parker family harbored deep tensions that no amount of holiday cheer could mask. Megan, the eldest daughter, had always been fiercely competitive and carried a simmering resentment toward her youngest sister, Emma. Emma, who had been adopted as a baby, seemed to receive more attention and affection from their parents, a fact Megan never failed to notice. Though Megan's success as a lawyer brought pride to the family, she often felt overshadowed by what she saw as Emma's undeserved position as the favorite. Dylan, the middle child, was the family's black sheep. Charismatic but reckless, he had spent years making poor financial decisions, accumulating significant gambling debts. Unbeknownst to most, Dylan had recently borrowed money from Richard to settle with a dangerous loan shark. Richard's patience was wearing thin, and Dylan's position in the family was growing increasingly strained. At the dinner table, he avoided his father's stern gaze and drank more wine than anyone else. Evelyn, while orchestrating the perfect evening, carried a secret of her own. Her carefully curated life concealed the truth that, if exposed, could shatter her family. She glanced at Emma throughout the evening, her expression betraying flickers of anxiety. Emma, innocent and oblivious, was her mother's greatest source of pride and the reason for her greatest fear. Among the guests was Gabriel, a distant cousin who had recently reconnected with the family. Though charming and quick to mingle, Gabriel had a sharp, observant demeanor. He seemed to notice every awkward glance, every forced smile, and every subtle shift in mood. As the evening unfolded, he watched the interactions between the family members with unsettling intensity, as if he were piecing together a puzzle only he could see. As dessert was served, the tension became more palpable. Megan's icy demeanor toward Emma grew harder to ignore, Dylan grew quieter and more brooding, and Evelyn appeared increasingly distracted. Though the guests were largely unaware of the underlying friction, the family's facade was beginning to crack. Gabriel's knowing smirk as he raised his glass to toast hinted that he might know more than he let on, his gaze lingering just a moment too long on Evelyn. By the time the last guest left and the laughter faded, the Parker family was left alone in their sprawling home. The warmth of the evening had evaporated, leaving behind an air of unease. What should have been a joyful Thanksgiving was instead marked by unspoken words, hidden resentments, and secrets teetering on the edge of revelation. For the Parkers, the perfect holiday was nothing more than a fragile illusion, and it was about to come crashing down. The morning after the Thanksgiving dinner, the Parker household was quiet, the remnants of the celebration scattered across the dining room. Evelyn rose early, as she always did, determined to restore order before anyone else woke. While clearing the table, she noticed a folded envelope on the floor near the front door. At first, she thought it might have been left by a guest, but as she picked it up, a chill ran through her. Her name was scrawled on the front in shaky, uneven handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper carried an ominous message: "Your secrets aren't as safe as you think. Tonight, the truth comes out." Evelyn's heart raced as she read and reread the note. She looked around, half expecting someone to appear, but the house remained silent. The words lingered in her mind, dredging up fears she had fought to suppress for years. Someone knew. Someone had discovered the truth she had kept hidden for so long. Her hands trembled as she folded the note and tucked it into her pocket, her mind spinning with questions. Who had sent it? And what did they intend to do? Desperate to maintain her composure, Evelyn threw herself into preparations for the day's festivities. Thanksgiving wasn't over yet, and tonight would be the highlight of formal dinner for the immediate family, a more intimate tradition that Evelyn insisted on every year. As she basted the turkey and polished the silverware, her thoughts kept returning to the note. Her movements became mechanical, her usual attention to detail slipping as her anxiety grew. By the afternoon, the family began to gather in the dining room, but the atmosphere was noticeably different. Megan arrived first, her polished demeanor masking the simmering frustration she felt after a tense conversation with Evelyn the night before. She exchanged polite pleasantries but spent much of the afternoon avoiding her mother's gaze and casting sharp glances at Emma. Dylan appeared next, his disheveled look and bloodshot eyes betraying a night of little sleep. He muttered a quick greeting before retreating to the corner with a drink in hand. Emma, always cheerful and bright, seemed oblivious to the tension in the room. Her carefree attitude only deepened Megan's resentment, while Evelyn watched her youngest daughter with a mixture of pride and fear. Evelyn's nerves were fraying, her attention darting between her children, wondering if one of them might know more than they let on. Every time the door creaked or a shadow passed, she felt her chest tighten. As evening fell, Gabriel joined the family. He was the last to arrive, his presence commanding attention as he strolled into the room. He carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, and his sharp eyes seemed to dissect the room. He greeted everyone warmly, but his gaze lingered on Evelyn a little too long. She tried to ignore it, brushing it off as her own paranoia, but something about Gabriel unnerved her. His smirk, his knowing glances, there was something he wasn't saying. As the family settled into their seats for dinner, the tension became almost unbearable. Gabriel proposed a toast, raising his glass with a cryptic smile. He locked eyes with Evelyn and said, "To family and to the truth finally coming to light." Evelyn froze, her knuckles white around the carving knife. The words he spoke, though seemingly innocent, sent a shiver down Evelyn's spine. She froze, gripping her fork as her mind raced to connect the dots. She didn't know who had sent the note or how much they knew, but one thing was certain: whoever it was, they were already in the house. The dinner continued, but the warmth of the previous night was gone. The family ate in near silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the air. Evelyn glanced around the table, searching for any sign of who might be responsible. Her children seemed distracted, their expressions tense, while Gabriel remained calm and composed, savoring every bite with unsettling ease. As the meal ended and the family began to drift into separate rooms, Evelyn felt the growing sense that the evening was heading toward something catastrophic. The words from the note echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the threat looming over her. Someone was about to reveal the truth she had fought so hard to keep hidden, and as the shadows deepened in the corners of the house, she realized there was no stopping what was about to unfold. The piercing sound of a frantic 911 call at 11:43 p.m. shattered the stillness of the Parker estate that night. Megan's trembling voice spilled through the line, her words choked with panic and fear. All she could manage to convey was that there was blood, so much blood, and something terrible had happened in the dining room. Within minutes, the wail of sirens filled the air, and flashing lights illuminated the quiet Maplewood neighborhood. When officers entered the Parker home, they found a grisly scene. Richard Parker's lifeless body was slumped over the dining table, a carving knife embedded deep in his chest. The dining room, which just hours earlier had been the centerpiece of a Thanksgiving feast, now looked like a battlefield. Plates of half-eaten food were scattered across the table, wine glasses lay shattered on the floor, and chairs were overturned in disarray. A dark pool of blood had spread beneath Richard's body, staining the expensive Persian rug beneath him. The family was hysterical. Evelyn was found sitting on the floor near the table, sobbing uncontrollably, her face pale and tear-streaked. Emma stood frozen near the doorway, her wide eyes fixed on her father's body, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Dylan sat in a corner of the room, his face pale and his expression unreadable, as though he had retreated deep within himself. The stark contrast between his silence and Megan's hysteria painted a troubling picture. Gabriel, however, was nowhere to be found. Detectives quickly cordoned off the scene and began their investigation. One of the officers gently led Evelyn away from the body, trying to console her while questioning her about what had happened. She could barely speak, her words a fragmented jumble of disbelief and sorrow. Megan was still sobbing, repeatedly saying that she had come back downstairs and found her father like this, but her words were laced with anger and suspicion. She seemed certain that one of the others knew more than they were letting on. As the detectives began piecing together the timeline of the evening, they noticed that the family's accounts didn't quite match. Emma claimed that she had seen Dylan arguing with Richard earlier in the night, their voices raised enough that she had overheard fragments of the conversation from the hallway. Dylan, however, insisted he had left the table early to make a phone call and hadn't returned until much later. His story was shaky at best, his nerves betraying him as he avoided direct eye contact with the officers. Megan was quick to point fingers at Emma, claiming that the youngest sibling had stormed out of the room after a heated exchange with their father. Evelyn, still in shock, could only mutter fragments about how the evening had seemed fine until it wasn't. As the investigation continued, the detectives discovered something chilling. In the bushes just outside the dining room window, partially hidden among the leaves, they found a second carving knife. This knife had been carefully wiped clean of fingerprints, as if someone had deliberately tried to conceal its presence. Its discovery added a disturbing new layer to the mystery. If this knife wasn't the murder weapon, why had it been hidden, and who had put it there? While the detectives worked to analyze the new evidence, suspicion within the Parker family reached a boiling point. Evelyn's erratic behavior and her obvious distress made her an early suspect, but the conflicting accounts from Megan, Dylan, and Emma only deepened the uncertainty. Each of them had motives, whether buried in resentment, desperation, or hidden secrets. But the missing piece of the puzzle remained Gabriel, whose abrupt disappearance cast a long shadow over the investigation. By the time the police left that night, the Parker home was no longer the picture-perfect setting it had been just hours earlier. It was now a house filled with fear, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Somewhere in the darkness, the truth about Richard's murder waited to be uncovered. But the deeper the investigators dug, the more tangled the web of secrets became. As the investigation into Richard Parker's murder unfolded, the focus shifted to Gabriel, the enigmatic cousin who had vanished from the scene. His absence raised immediate suspicions, and detectives began digging into his background. What they uncovered painted a far more complicated picture of Gabriel's connection to the Parker family. He was not merely a distant relative who had recently reconnected with them, he had a personal stake in the Parker household that no one had anticipated. Years earlier, before Emma's adoption, Gabriel had been placed in the foster system after a troubled childhood. What Evelyn and Richard had never told anyone, not even their children, was that Emma was not a random adoption. She was Gabriel's biological half-sister, sharing the same mother. Evelyn learned about Gabriel shortly after adopting Emma, but had chosen to keep his existence a secret, fearing it would disrupt their carefully cultivated family life. Gabriel, however, had found out about Emma years later through old family records and had spent years tracking down Evelyn. Detectives discovered a series of emails between Gabriel and Evelyn, dating back months before Thanksgiving. In the messages, Gabriel demanded that Evelyn reveal the truth about Emma's adoption and their shared connection. He accused Evelyn of depriving Emma of knowing her real family and implied that he would take matters into his own hands if Evelyn refused. Evelyn's responses were evasive and increasingly desperate, pleading with Gabriel to stay away from her family. The anonymous letter, it seemed, was his doing. But why had he vanished the night of the murder? It soon became clear that Gabriel had not attended the Parker Thanksgiving dinner out of familial goodwill. He had an agenda, and detectives suspected that the anonymous letter Evelyn received was his doing. The phrasing in the letter mirrored some of the threatening language he had used in the emails. It was as if Gabriel had been laying the groundwork for a confrontation that night, determined to force Evelyn to expose the truth. As detectives tracked Gabriel's movements, they uncovered another troubling link: his connection to Dylan. Surveillance footage from a gas station showed the two meeting a few days before Thanksgiving. Further investigation revealed that Dylan, drowning in gambling debts, had reached out to Gabriel for help. Gabriel, ever calculating, had seen an opportunity. Detectives theorized that Gabriel had offered Dylan money in exchange for helping him pressure Evelyn into revealing her secret. The footage showed Dylan leaving with an envelope, presumably filled with cash, solidifying the suspicion that Gabriel had involved him in his plan. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the second carving knife revealed a faint blood stain that had been missed during the initial cleaning attempt. It wasn't Richard's blood. Instead, DNA analysis pointed to Dylan, further implicating him in the unfolding drama. Detectives speculated that the knife might have been part of a botched attempt by Dylan and Gabriel to intimidate Richard or Evelyn. But something had gone horribly wrong. Perhaps Gabriel had miscalculated Dylan's desperation or underestimated the emotional volatility of the situation. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, the Parker family's facade continued to crumble. Evelyn was forced to admit to detectives that she had known about Gabriel's connection to Emma, but had hoped to keep it buried forever. Megan and Emma, blindsided by the revelation, found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about their family. Dylan, already burdened by guilt and fear, grew increasingly erratic under police scrutiny, his every word and action betraying a mounting sense of panic. Despite Gabriel's calculated manipulations, one question remained unanswered: where was he now? His disappearance left a gaping hole in the investigation. Detectives were certain he held the key to unraveling the events of that night, but his absence only deepened the mystery. With every new discovery, the Parker family sank further into chaos, their once perfect lives spiraling into a nightmare of secrets, betrayal, and bloodshed. Days turned into a whirlwind of interrogations, evidence analysis, and relentless tension as the investigation reached its boiling point. Gabriel remained missing, leaving behind only a trail of suspicion and unanswered questions. The Parker family, once the epitome of suburban perfection, now found themselves at the center of a media frenzy, their darkest secrets dragged into the spotlight. Every revelation deepened the fractures in their relationships, turning their shared grief into mutual distrust. Forensic analysis of the bloodied knife tied Dylan closer to the events of the murder, but he maintained his innocence, insisting he had no part in his father's death. However, when police uncovered his mounting debts and his secret meeting with Gabriel, his story began to collapse. Bank records showed a suspicious deposit in Dylan's account just days before Thanksgiving, further fueling the theory that Gabriel had paid him for his involvement. Whether Dylan had intended to intimidate his father or had acted out of desperation, the evidence painted him as a key player in the night's events. Evelyn, meanwhile, struggled to hold the family together. Her carefully constructed life had unraveled entirely, and the truth about Emma's adoption and Gabriel's connection to her was now public knowledge. Emma was devastated by the revelation, feeling like her entire identity had been built on a lie. Megan, already harboring years of resentment, lashed out at Evelyn, accusing her of prioritizing appearances over the well-being of her children. The family dynamic had become a volatile powder keg, each member grappling with their own guilt, anger, and betrayal. A breakthrough came when detectives received an anonymous tip about Gabriel's whereabouts. He was found hiding in a motel on the outskirts of town, disheveled and visibly on edge. His arrest brought a mix of relief and dread to the Parkers. Gabriel initially refused to cooperate, but under pressure he began to unravel his version of the events. He admitted to sending the threatening letter to Evelyn and conspiring with Dylan, but he denied any direct involvement in Richard's death. He claimed that things had spiraled out of control and that someone else in the family had turned the situation deadly. This confession threw the investigation into disarray. Gabriel's story shifted suspicion back to the remaining Parkers, forcing detectives to re-examine the evidence. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source: security footage from the Parker estate's outdoor cameras. It captured the moment Richard was attacked, and the identity of the killer sent shockwaves through everyone involved. The footage revealed Megan as the culprit. In a fit of rage, she had confronted Richard during the dinner, accusing him of favoritism and financial neglect. Their argument escalated, and in the heat of the moment she grabbed the carving knife and stabbed him. Gabriel and Dylan, both complicit in their own ways, had panicked and tried to cover up her crime, further complicating the chain of events. Evelyn's silence throughout the ordeal stemmed not only from her fear of Gabriel's threats, but also from her desperate attempt to protect Megan, whom she had suspected all along. Megan's arrest marked the tragic conclusion of a Thanksgiving that had begun with warmth and tradition, but ended in betrayal and death. As the Parker family watched her taken away in handcuffs, they were left to face the ruins of their once idyllic lives. Secrets had destroyed them, and the bonds they once shared were irreparably broken. The murder of Richard Parker was not just the end of a life, but the unraveling of a family bound by lies, resentment, and silence. And as the door to the police car slammed shut, it seemed there was no path back to the lives they had lost. And so ends the dark and tragic story of the Thanksgiving tragedy. A chilling reminder that family secrets, when left to fester, can erupt into violence and despair. Thank you for joining us on this gripping journey. If you found this story as haunting as we did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Mystery Minds. Stay tuned for more tales of betrayal, mystery, and the darkest sides of human nature. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.